Welcome to video number 19. This is Greg Hughes for 90-Second Website Builder. In this next edition of the Quick Start video series, I'd like to show you how to use the photo gallery tool. Now it's very similar to the last video. I showed you in video 18 how to use the slideshow tool, which we found here in the images section of the toolbox. Well, we're just going to go up a couple notches to the photo gallery tool, which is very similar, but it adds some more functionality. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to scroll down the canvas and work under here so we have a blank space to work with. I'm going to grab a photo gallery tool and just draw a box. And you'll see if I double click on it, I can open up the photo gallery properties window and we can go take a look at all the settings for the photo gallery. Well, the first thing I need are some images. So I'm going to go back through and grab some images just like I did in the last video. I'm going to grab those book covers and use those as my example. I just click add and I locate them on my computer, click on them, click open, and I keep doing that. Now I'm going to do this until I get a few, and rather than make you sit through that, I'm going to pause the video and then come back once I have a few. Okay, so now I've added several images, in fact about 7 of them as you can see. And one of the things the photo gallery properties lets me do is look at thumbnails of all of the images I'm working with, which is nice. It also allows me to add some titles, which will make sense to you in a minute. I'll show you, I'll edit a couple of these so you can see what happens as we demonstrate. I'll call this one Magic Book, and let's just do a couple of them so you can see what it looks like. We're going to change this one a little bit to capital D there, how to do magic tricks. Let's change this one. So it's a magician whose name is Joshua J. So let's put him in the title. Obviously, I would do all of them just for the sake of speed. I'll just do some, and you'll see what those titles do as they show up in our work here in just a minute. First of all, let me just click OK so you can see what the photo gallery does. It gives me this sort of matrix or array of all of the images that I'm working with. Unlike the slideshow tool, which was up here, just gives me one image to work with, and then when we click on it, then we start to see the slideshow. So where the photo gallery is much different is it shows all of the images we're working with in our gallery in this matrix, which I can control a couple of different ways. For starters, I picked 7 objects, which is kind of an odd number, so I'm going to have sort of a funny looking matrix because I'll have this blank space here. That's okay. I can put words here or a PayPal link, or I can put any other object there in that blank space if I want to. Or I could have, done something sensible like use 9 book covers and make this be a nice, square display. But I also have control over this look by going into the properties window, and I can control how many columns I have and the spacing between those objects, etc. So I do have some control there. So you want to plan that out a little bit. I'm going to stick with 7 objects just for this demo. Just so you can see how all this works. Now, one of the things it's doing is it's displaying these thumbnails in a variable size. In other words, kind of based on their original size somewhat. But I can change that too. But before I make any changes, let me show you what happens just in the default settings of the photo gallery. So all I've done is put 7 objects in a photo gallery, haven't made any changes to it. This is just the default setting. I'm going to click F5 so I can preview this and see what it would look like on a website. So remember, I did it at the bottom of the page here, so I'm going to scroll down so we can find it. And there is my photo gallery. And you can see these are all slightly different sizes, but they're close. And it's because that's what that variable means. It just sort of makes them somewhat the same. As I click on any one of these, what it does is just basically takes me to that image in its own window, like this. Now, that's fine if you do want to show somebody an actual image in its own window like this, but there's no navigation here because this isn't really a web page we've taken them to. We've actually taken them to the JPEG, to the file of the image, which means your user is going to have to know how to go to their back browser, or rather their back button on their browser to go back to where they were. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. So if they click on an image, they'll see there's the image in its original size. In this case, it's a small one. And then they have to be able to go back and then go like this and see the next one. As you can see, it's larger because it's its original size. So that's really not my favorite way to use the photo gallery, and that's without using any settings. I'd like to make it a little bit more friendly. So let's go back to it. I'm going to close the preview, and I'm going to double click on the photo gallery to bring up the properties window again. And instead of doing it that way, we have some other options. And they're found under behavior. We used gallery mode that just says open in same browser window. Well, that's really simple. We can also do some other things. We can open up in a pop-up window. Well, let's see what happens when we just do that. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click F5 to preview this work. Scroll down because I put it here down at the bottom of this web page. Now when I click on one of the images, you'll see it actually opens it up in its own window here, in its own little browser window, which the user could move around and drag around like they would any window on their desktop. Well, that's a little better because we're only opening up a little window. In fact, the window opens to the exact size that the image is. If I was to do it on a smaller image, I would get a smaller window, and I would then be able to move that around. The user can move that around. Well, that's a little better, but still there are some other tricks we can use to make the photo gallery even easier to work with for our visitors. So I'm going to go back in, and instead of using a pop-up window, I can use what's called a jQuery dialog. Now, if you've worked with any of the jQuery objects, you'll recognize that word, and that's a particular kind of window that opens up. That looks pretty good. So we're going to use the jQuery dialog for our sort of pop-up. Click OK, and I'm going to click F5 to preview this. Let's see what happens when we click on one of our photo gallery images now with the jQuery dialog method. Okay, what that does is it grays out the background, which is kind of cool, and it gives me this sort of a window here. This is a jQuery window. Now the color and theme of this is going to be decided by the jQuery theme of the page, which we cover in another video. I won't go into that right here, but just know that this is all editable. It doesn't have to be this light blue and this sort of look. You can change this. But this is the effect that it brings. It brings me to a pop-up window that in this case I have a close button and I can stretch. So you might want to do that. That looks a little bit better, doesn't it? Let's close this and close the preview, go back to the settings, and the jQuery dialog method allows me to do more because it also gives me the settings button. I can actually decide how that little jQuery window opens. Right now it opens at 400 by 300. I can change that. It's a type of dialog called a modal. I can turn that off. You can mess with that and see what that does. I can even animate the way it displays or the way it closes by using some of these options here. How the text is displayed, its font, its size, its all the good stuff, style, everything you'd find in fonts. So the point here is that jQuery dialog window is editable, and you can change the way it looks when it pops up. But I want to show you one other feature in the photo gallery properties that I like even better than all of that. And there's plenty to play with there. You might like that jQuery dialog box if you want to mess around with that. Here's the one I like. It's the Lightbox gallery. It's the same thing we used in the slideshow. And what I like about the Lightbox gallery is it's very easy to use, it's very fast, and it just looks pretty up to date on your website. Now, a Lightbox always has at least 4 different types, and the fancy box is just the basic Lightbox look. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to click F5 to preview it. And if you watched video number 18, you'll recognize this effect. We did it with the slideshow. But now with the photo gallery, I can click on any one of the images here in my matrix, and here that Lightbox pops up, which is really, really kind of cool. I can just close it this way. I can go like this. And by the way, I have arrows, forward and back arrows, so I can click through to the next image. As you can see, go to the previous image because that was the last image. And I can click through them by just using this same Lightbox effect. Now remember, the Lightbox, like I said, I'm closing this out now, has more than one effect. That was the fancy box. There's also several others. The pretty photo is a good one. Let's do that really quick. You'll remember that gives me a few more options. So I'm going to click F5. And let's look at the Lightbox one more time using the pretty photo effect. Here we've got this kind of an effect, which is great. Again, it gives me, let me move the camera a little bit. It gives me the little arrows down below where I can click through. I realize you can't see some of that's going off the screen. It also allows me to click through these little icons down here to jump to another image if I want to. Or I can use these buttons up here. Also, remember when we changed the titles originally? Look, this is where they're going to show, right here and right here. So it did matter what I called those things. Let me go back. Remember I called this one Magic Book, and so it shows here. And so that's picked up by the pretty photo. That's a great effect. Let me close this and close the preview. And so that's pretty much it, actually. Let me double click here and show you one more thing. You're going to want to play around with some of these different effects to see which works best for you. For example, I'm using the thumbnail size of variable. You can change that if you want your thumbnails to be all 160 by 160 or whatever the presets are here you can use. I go like this. I have larger thumbnails. I can change the padding, the space between those thumbnails if I want to. I'm going to leave this at variable for now. The other thing I can do is I can also change the style of the frame around these. Let me show you what I mean. So you can see right now these are just images, just bare images. If I go to style and I choose a frame, like let's say Cupertino, and by the way you can preview these, then this will be the frame around each one of those images. I'm going to click OK, and you can see I've got a nice little frame around my images, which is great. That's under the Style tab, and again there's a bunch of them. I can click through them here so you can see all kinds of ways to do that. Let's look at this one and click OK. Now they all have sort of a rounded black frame. Looks kind of like an iPad. But there's also one here called Polaroid, just the one in parentheses. When you click Polaroid, it actually lets you adjust the size of the frame. So you can choose the width right here, and you'll notice in the preview what it's doing. And you can put a shadow or whatever. So you can decide on what that frame looks like, what color it is. Make your own little frame. If you're going to be displaying text in the thumbnail, you can do that. If I change this to white, you see my text is going to be down here. So now it's going to look like a little Polaroid with text in it. So that's just the advantage of the photo gallery over the slideshow. You have a lot more options on how your pictures show. And of course, the big difference is you get to show them in this sort of matrix layout, this array, so that your user can see your images as they click on them. So this is a great tool if you're a photographer or a web designer and you want to show thumbnails of your work. Anybody that has any kind of a portfolio, an artist of any kind, this is just a great way to display your images on your website built with 90-second website builder.